Hi class, it's Miss Martin. Happy Friday. I hope that you guys have something exciting planned for this Friday. Maybe, hopefully. Hopefully last weekend you had a lot of fun. Also though, celebrating your mother for Mother's Day. Father's Day is coming up soon, so make sure that you are celebrating your father as well. Anyways, so this week we've been reading about Cesar Chavez. We've been reading about him once again because he is an activist, and the week before we were talking about how we could be activists ourselves. Today what we're going to be looking at is the essential question: how can we create fairness? So you're going to be looking at that essential question through Mr. Cesar Chavez and his story. We're reading once again a biography. That means it's a book about his life. It is in a comic book format though. If you remember with, I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about. With a comic book format, you guys can see that there's going to be little bubbles that are pointing to a person, and those are to indicate to the reader that he's talking. It's called a speech bubble. Okay, so before we get started, I want you guys to remember that while I'm reading, to remember this essential question: how can we create fairness? Also, what we're going to be looking at is a timeline. We're going to be looking at a timeline of Cesar Chavez's life. So we first kind of started off the book at 1937. What happened in the beginning of the book in 1937? Take a moment and think about it. Then what happened after that? When he was in 8th grade, there was a big moment in his life. Something happened. Also at age 17, something big happened, something important, a significant event to his life. In 1952, something important happened with him and his family as he was growing up. And then in 1962, it was dealing with something that he did with his union. And then in 1966, we're going to read about that today. So I want you to keep this timeline in your mind as we are reading, as we're moving forward. So we've already basically covered up to 1962. We've covered about that. So we only have like one more event that we're going to be going over. If you forgot what has happened in these prior years, what you could do is you could go back through the read alouds. So you go back to the read alouds. Also, something else that you could do is you could go, this book is on Myon. So if I were to show you guys how to do that, you would just go to Myon, click on Myon. And then from Myon, I would go to my library. I would go to search. You can search for book titles or names. You could literally just type in Cesar and then Chavez. And it's this middle one right here. The middle one is a comic book, Cesar Chavez Fighting for Farmers' Rights. You would go to read, so you could read it. And then it starts it. And so you have the comic book on your screen. So you don't have to go back through all my YouTube channels. You can figure out what happened or what event happened in each year through going back through the book and going and flipping through the pages. Okay, so we last left off on, we already talked about the grape strike. With the grape strike, it was basically the Filipino workers weren't being paid enough. That's why they were having that strike. And Cesar Chavez joined with the Filipinos, and they together worked as a team to get better get a better pay for the workers. So he was asking people to join in this last page. He was asking people to help join in with the organization. His organization is called the NFWA. That stands for National Farmer Workers Association. So what we're gonna look at with the timeline, we're also gonna look at the 3 events that Cesar Chavez, 3 actions or events that he's created with the NFWA. So if we go back one of the actions that he first created with the NFWA, in here, it talks about how it says the NFWA voted to join the Filipinos in the strike. So that was our first action, joined Filipinos in strike in Joaquin, it says in Joaquin Valley. There's 2 other events that are going to be happening that we are going to look at today that he does with the NFWA. So he's already joined the strike. He's going to do 2 other things with his association. Okay, so right here, I'm going to start my reading. Donations came, and so did hundreds of volunteers to join the strike. Viva la cause, you tell these people striking. What do these picketers from the city know? They never touched soil in their lives. You can kind of tell right here that these people seem to look kind of like policemen of the field or enforcers of the field. They're making sure that these strikers do not cross that barrier. That's why they have some weapons. But the people who are striking, they don't have weapons. They're doing a very nonviolent protest. That December, the NFW took further action. Oh, Caesar's actions with the NFW. What did they do? Well, Caesar organized a boycott of all vineyard products from the chenille industries in California. What's going on? Don't buy anything from chenille. They don't pay their workers fairly. So that would be one of our other events that happen, is that they are boycotting certain goods. They start boycott of certain goods because the workers who work for that farm to create the goods are not getting paid fairly. By March, the strike against the grape growers had lasted 6 months. Caesar knew he had to gain more attention for La Casa. In March 1966, he and hundreds of farm workers began a march from Delano to Sacramento, California's capital. We will demand a meeting with the governor. We will force him to hear about La Casa. So remember, in our timeline, I said that there's very important events happening. This could be one of those important events. He marched all the way down to the capital in California, in Sacramento, to demand justice. He wanted equality for those workers. That kind of reminds me of something that we've talked about. We've talked about Martin Luther King. We've talked about all the marches that he's done. That's what it reminds me of, is they're using marches to protest the treatment of people. Our suffering will not go unnoticed. We will bring about justice for all farm workers. Near the end of the journey, news arrived for Caesar. Caesar, I have a message for chenille. They want to sign a contract. Remember, if you go back in the last page, they were boycotting chenille because chenille wasn't paying their workers enough. So they were telling people to boycott or not buy chenille products, or products made by chenille factories. The boycott and bad press had hurt chenille. That's like the company. Caesar met with a lawyer from the company to settle the dispute. The company wants the workers to return to the fields. Then chenille must give field workers better wages. After 25 days, the marchers reached the capital and heard good news from Caesar. We have reached an agreement with chenille. They will let the NFW represent its workers. And they have agreed to a 35-cent raise. So they're very happy because they're actually, so chenille is offering and letting them have a union, and it's also giving them more money now. So that deal was really good for the workers. You see how he's fighting for those workers, even though he's not one of them at this time. The agreement with chenille was a huge victory for the NFWA, but Caesar and Dolores Huerta were thinking about other battles. We must reach agreement with the other growers. So that's Miss Dolores Huerta. She's suggesting something to Caesar, saying, I think we should go and expand and do some other thing. We should make deals with other people, other companies, not just Schneely. We'll go back. We'll go back to continue the strike with great hopes that it will not last much longer. In August 1966, the NFWA officially joined with the AWOC. They formed a new union called the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee. Caesar was its director. The UFWOC later became the United Farm Workers. So that was the last thing I was going to put. Caesar's actions with the NFWA is he joined with, it's called what? He joined with the AWOC, and what did they create in the end? They created what is called the UFW, or the United Farm Workers. That's what it stands for. United, the U, F is farm, W is workers, United Farm Workers. So it's still a big union that's, but it has more members now because they joined with someone else, as more workers. Over the next few years, the UFW won other contracts with growers. Caesar led national boycotts of the produce from growers who refused to work with the UFW. Workers and other unions often supported them. Load those grapes. No way. Those grapes are DiGiorgio. We support the UFW. They're boycotting DiGiorgio. So you see that this person's not loading the grapes into the truck and taking them to the grocery store because he's saying, this other guy's saying, well, we're boycotting. We're not going to buy from DiGiorgio. Soon the UFW asked people to boycott all California grapes. Excuse me, could I ask you to help farm workers by not buying grapes? People all across the country refused to buy grapes. For most people, it was the first time they thought about farm workers and their terrible working conditions. So once again, Caesar is bringing about change. He's changing how people are behaving and what they're buying. So normal people who are going to the store every day, they aren't buying grapes any longer. Why? Why aren't they buying those grapes? I'd like you to take a second to make that inference. They kind of told us, and you can see through this image, why are people not buying grapes any longer? Well, they're being more aware. They're becoming more aware from others telling them how the farm workers are treated. Since the farm workers are treated so horribly, you don't want to be giving money to these companies you would be giving money to the companies by buying those goods. So what I like to think about when I'm buying food is, where am I getting it from? What company am I getting it from, and how do they treat their workers? It's very important to kind of research that and to look into that. Let's say if you're buying Nestle chocolate, maybe look into Nestle and see who are they, who are their workers, and how are they treating those workers. Let's see what else happens and how else Caesar is able to make difference and change in America. Meanwhile, the growers became more violent. Tension on the picket lines grew. The striker's patient was wearing thin. He ran over Manuel. Please, we must remain peaceful. This is Chavez. That's his little speech bubble. Some strikers reacted to the violence with violence of their own. Finally, at a union meeting, Caesar announced he would not eat until the violence ended. So that means back and forth they were having violence, and he's saying, I'm going to pledge to be very nonviolent, and I'm going to pledge to just not eat while you guys are fighting with each other. Caesar's hero Gandhi had used fasting as a way to protest. You're not going to eat. You'll kill yourself. What will that prove? I will sacrifice myself to remind our people that the struggle is about dignity and value. Violence is not the answer. So he was being inspired by another activist, Gandhi. He's being inspired by him and saying, I'm going to do the same thing as him. I'm going to protest by going into a famine. Caesar went in a room at the Union headquarters for 25 days. He drank only water and ate no food. thousands of farm workers arrived to show their support for Caesar. Again, national media covered the event. Priests who supported Caesar also came to the Union headquarters. The workers renewed their pledge of nonviolence. Caesar has finally ended his fast. People follow Caesar because he cares about more than just the Union. He wants to do what is right. That kind of brings up my question. How can we create fairness, or how can we follow through with doing what we think is right? What sort of actions can we take to always make sure we are doing what's right and helping there be rightness in the world? Finally, in July 1970, the grape growers had lost so much money that they gave in. They met with Caesar to sign an agreement. The UFW will represent all field workers. Workers will have an equal say in deciding fair working conditions. The strikers and the people involved in the struggle sacrificed a lot, sacrificed all of their worldly possessions. And so I'm going to go to the last page. Throughout the years, Caesar continued to fight for the rights of workers. We'll keep fighting for farm workers. They must be able to work safely in fields, free of dangerous pesticides and other chemicals. So Caesar died in April 1993. He is remembered for his dedication and sacrifice for the good of all farm workers. Okay, so now that I'm done reading, I'd like you to remember what I wanted you guys, a skill that I wanted to kind of have you guys focus on was creating a timeline. Or that's not really a skill, excuse me, that's more of the activity I wanted you to do. The skill is being able to retell what is happening in his life. So being able to give me a summary about his life and about this book. Because his book went over his life, it was biography. So you can display that you are able to retell and summarize a person's life through creating a timeline. Sorry, that dropped. The other thing is you're going to be answering this last question on our timeline, or on our exit ticket. How can we create fairness? Okay, so this is a long video. I know, I'm sorry. I just wanted to finish the story. And it was longer. I thought we had finished a little bit more throughout the week, but we did finish finally. The last thoughts I'd like you to think about is how he was a advocate for other people, for a big group of people. He helped workers, and there are a lot of people working right now in facing other people and maybe facing the disease and of COVID, and just be very thankful and grateful for those people who are still working, and maybe they're not getting the best wage, maybe they're not getting the best working conditions. I'd also like you to think about that and how you could help be a person of change, help those people during these times who are still working. Thanks for watching the Read Aloud, and make sure you do the exit ticket. Have a great Friday and have a great weekend. Yeah, that completes today's. Woohoo! Bye, guys.